Hey guys, just doing a quick comparison of some toasted malts. I've got some amber malt and some Biscuit and some Victory malt. These are all store-bought malts. This here is an amber malt based on the Stopes recipe, and basically it went from 200 degrees to 250 degrees over the course of 4 hours, and it's pretty much the same color as the store-bought amber and the Victory. These are very similar in color. The Biscuit is much lighter than all of them. Flavor wise, the Biscuit is the most bland. The Victory is still bland, not as bland, but it tastes kind of like just a plain cracker. The amber malt is much more pronounced in that toasty roasted flavor, and the Stopes amber tastes very much like the store-bought amber. Now I also did some other malts here. It started out as a pale malt, and I just toasted them at 300 degrees. This one for 30 minutes, the second one for an hour, and then the third one for an hour and a half. So every 30 minutes I took a sample. You can see the huge color jump in half an hour at 300 degrees. I'm going to do another sample at 250 degrees just to get some more samples in between these two colors. This is very much the color of the Biscuit malt. So if you wanted to make a Biscuit malt out of some pale malt, 300 degrees at 30 minutes, it's perfect. This one is darker than any of the other malts. It's starting to turn that reddish color. So 45 minutes at 300 degrees, you could get something more similar to a store-bought amber. But at 250 degrees, you have a little more control over the color. Flavor-wise, though, this one here has a lot more flavor than the store-bought Biscuit. It has a nice roasty quality to it. These ones even more so. Don't know what's going on with the store-bought Biscuit. Just very bland. Okay, so each one of these samples represents a half hour in the oven at 250 degrees Fahrenheit. The first one is just a pale malt. As you can see, the color after 1 hour looks almost like a Biscuit malt, or the Biscuit malt sample. And then after 2 hours, you have it looking more like a Victory malt. And then after the 2 hour mark, the color doesn't really change all that much. This is where you want to, if you wanted to go darker, you increase the temperature to 300 350. Or here is the Biscuit malt sample, and the Victory actually even looks like an hour and a half to 2 hours. So I wanted to see if there's a difference between soaking the grain and then roasting it at a high temperature like 350, as opposed to having a dry grain roasted at a lower temperature. I'm suspecting there's going to be more color in this one just because the grain is getting wet. So for the lightly toasted malts, I wouldn't bother soaking them if you want like a Biscuit malt. Okay, so this has been an hour at 350 after soaking for an hour in water, and what you will see are some kernels are quite burnt, so there's a lot of inconsistency here. There's quite a variety of burnt and unburnt kernels. Alright, so this one soaked for an hour and took 45 minutes to dry at 350, and I took this sample out at that point. And then 15 minutes later, I took this sample out. As you can see, it's a lot darker. So as I suspected, this is quite a bit darker than the lightly toasted grains, but it's got a really nice flavor. I wouldn't call it sweeter, definitely more of a roasted, toasty character to it. This is a malt that's was soaked for 2 hours. And then put in the oven at 250. Now that took 3 hours to completely dry at 250, and you get a nice amber malt color to it. I didn't really notice much of a flavor difference though. I put it back in the oven at 350 for only half an hour, and that's when you start to get these coffee colors here. So 350 is quite a high temperature, and you get a lot of change happening very quickly. So that's a half-hour difference right there. So here's what the grain looks like. That's this one. It's just starting to burn a little bit, but it's mostly sort of a reddish color. I would say that this one has a more pronounced roasted flavor, and this one's a little mellower. This one is similar to the malt that was roasted at 250 from the dry state, so not a lot of difference there. This has a great flavor, very much like molasses, and so does this one actually, but not as strong. The color's a little bit lighter in this one, of course. One last thing I want to try is roasting dry at a high temperature, just to see if there's a difference between that and roasting at a low temperature for a longer period of time. So it's been in there for 45 minutes. Now this is from dry at 350 degrees, and it actually has the same appearance as the other malt that was soaked for an hour and then dried at 350. You have a lot of grains that appear to be slightly burnt, and a lot of grains that are not. From dry at 350, it took 30 minutes to get to a similar color, same as a Victory or an amber malt.